Hi everyone, and welcome to Martin's Home and Garden's Houseplant of the Week. This week we're talking about a widely valued houseplant that is known for its beautiful trailing foliage and the deep green color of the leaves. Also the fact that it's shaped like a heart, and who doesn't like some cute heart stuff happening in their house? So what we'll kind of get into today is how these are a really easy to care for houseplant. We'll kind of talk about their requirements. And also the fact that these are toxic to pets, so that is something to remember. But other than that, they're a really good option for new houseplant owners that don't want the standard pothos, which is really popular as far as trailing houseplants go. This one needs a little bit more, but it is just kind of a little bit different than pothos. So it's just kind of something to check out, and we would love to talk to you more about it. So let's get into it. These plants are native to Central America and the Caribbean. They are epiphytic. So what we know about all of this information combined is that they love that nice, hot, tropical environment. And then we also know that they grow up the understory of the tree along the bark. So we know that because they're epiphytic, kind of like pretty much most other philodendrons. Orchids are epiphytic. There are lots of different plants that are epiphytic, and these are one of those. So if you see these really fun aerial roots that are growing out of the leaf node, don't cut them off. They're not a problem. What they actually are roots that grab the plant's stem and attach it to the bark of the tree. So they're really a necessity in the habit of this plant. Now in your home, if you're not wanting them to grow on anything, they're not a necessity. But if you were to propagate your plant at any point, you do want aerial roots to be on the propagation, just to make it easier for it to root and everything. So we know that they're epiphytic, we know they're toxic to pets, we know that they like it nice and warm and sunny. So let's kind of get into what that looks like in your house. So for light, these plants like around 6 hours of bright and direct light. They never want direct light. And they can adapt to lower light situations if you have them. The only instance where that doesn't apply is if you have the Brazil version of this plant, which is its nice cousin that has a really pretty lime green variegation in the bottom of, or in the middle of the leaf. So that's a plant that is very similar, but it does need more light in order to keep that variegation. So if you want the variegation to be nice and beautiful and large, you got to keep it. This one will not turn variegated though. So that's something to note. The more light you give this, it will not turn variegated. So if you want the variegations, I would go for the Brazil version of this plant. But if you like the dark green, this plant's for you. So make sure that you're giving it the light that it wants and you're supplying it with as much light as possible pretty much year round. And then make sure to rotate your plant, because you don't want all of the vines to be luscious and beautiful on one side and then the other side has one poor little vine going on or something like that. So just make sure that you are rotating your plants. As for watering these plants go, I like to say if you're giving your plant lots of sunlight and it's pretty dry in your house and things like that, and you're not letting it just sit in water, then what I would recommend doing for this plant is letting it dry out about halfway. If it's got, you know, the warmth, it's got the sun, that whole, you know, concoction, I would let the houseplant dry out halfway. But if you're in a situation where you're not giving it as much light, it's not as hot, there's not a ton of humidity, I would probably wait for it to dry out until about 2/3 of the way down. That way you can make sure that you're not making it more prone to root rot. They are kind of susceptible to that. So just make sure that you're not overwatering your plant. They are pretty drought tolerant, so if you do miss a watering, they'll tell you, they'll be okay, they'll bounce back up. You might get 1 or 2 yellowing leaves. The thing to note though is they are dramatic, so the second they need water, they will show you. So really just whenever they start to curl a little bit or wilt a little bit, that's when I would water, just so I know for sure, okay, I'm not going to hurt my plant with overwatering. But one thing that we do know is that if your leaves are yellowing, it means you're overwatering or you're underwatering. So what I recommend doing if you see any yellowing leaves is to take your plant out of the pot, check on the roots, see what they're telling you about what's going on there. If it's bone dry in there, you know what your answer is. If there's a lot of water at the bottom, but the top of it is dry, then you know what your answer is, that you're overwatering. Making sure that you have excellent draining soil, and then also a drainage hole is pretty crucial when raising any houseplant, but especially philodendrons. As for humidity, I would say these plants are humidity lovers. So I would try to give it a good amount of humidity, mist it every now and then also dust the leaves pretty frequently. And whenever you're dusting the leaves, I always recommend that you check the bottom, the underside of the leaf, for bugs, because they're kind of prone to a slew of different pests, and you really want to make sure that you're not going to get those. And the easiest way to control any kind of pathogen, pest, insect, disease, all of that, the easiest way to control it is by scouting for it early. So go through while you're dusting, get the top, get the bottom, and you'll be happy. You'll have happy plants. So make sure that you are supplying that humidity, misting, but also dust the leaves. As for temperature for these plants, they like around 60 to 85 degrees. I don't recommend going higher, don't really recommend going lower. So keep it in a nice happy medium and your plant will be happy. And as for repotting, they don't need to be repotted very often. I would say every 2 to 3 years, unless it's in this size and you see the roots are growing around the top. Then don't listen to the timeline, repot it, because you'll be able to tell when it needs to be repotted. And then whenever you do repot, I recommend using some kind of fertilizer to put in the soil. Use a nice well-drained cactus soil, maybe add some orchid bark in there to really give it that extra boost, because they're both epiphytic. So even though it just says orchid bark, it's good for other plants too. Make sure that when you repot, you keep some aerial roots out of the soil. They don't need to be planted. They like to be above the soil level. So make sure that you keep those out. Don't cut them off. The plant likes it. It's fine. Everything's natural and happy. So that's all good. And then if you do want to give it a nice little chop, a nice little pruning, whenever you do repot, you can do that pretty easily. And then you can actually propagate each piece in water, and you have lots of new plants. So you can do it in water, perlite, moss, whatever you feel is the best option for you. And then once the roots start to grow a little bit more, you can transfer it into soil. So, and then you'll have lots of new plants, or you can give them to all your friends. So spread the love. Thank you all for watching this week. We hope to see you soon, and we hope you have a good week.